Hey everyone, so this is going to be part 2 of our car through neural passage game, and in this part we're going to be creating a neural passage, checking for a collision, as well as making a scoreboard. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a block class, and this block class is going to be revolving around the left block, and we're going to be basing the right block based on the left block. So we want to create a function, def init self x, y, width, and the height. The x and y are going to be the coordinates of the block, and the width and the height are going to be the dimensions or the size of the block. So self.x is equal to x, self.y is equal to y, self.width is equal to width, self.height is equal to height. And we're going to have another value, self.gap, and this is going to be the gap between the left and the right block. And this gap is what the car is trying to go through. And this is going to be 80 pixels. So we want to create another function, a draw function, and this is just going to draw our blocks with two parameters, self and window. And we first want to draw the left block, so pygame.draw.rect window red and self.x self.y self.width self.height. And we want to create another variable, so right block x, and this is going to represent the left side of the right block. So this is going to be equal to self.x, and self.x basically represents the left side of the left block plus self.width, so plus the width of the left block plus the gap, so self.gap. And this is going to be equal to the right side of the, or the left side of the right block. Yeah. Now we want to create another one, right block width. And this is going to be equal to the east boundary minus right block x. Now we could draw the right block. So pygame.draw.rect window red right block x self.y right block width and right block, or no, not right block, and self.height, since the heights of the blocks are going to be the same. Now that we have this, we can move on to the game loop to create a block object. So let's go to our game loop right here, and now we could set block width equal to 60, block height equal to 20 pixels, block x is going to be equal to the west boundary for the left block, block y is going to be equal to 100. And we want to create a block object, so we just write block is equal to block x, block y, block width, block height. Great. Now that we have this, we can move on to show the block on the screen. And before we actually do that, let's draw our block right here. Yep, right here. Oops. So we could call the function draw, so block.draw window. Let's save this and run what we have so far. And now we have a left block, a right block, and we have a gap in between that the car is trying to navigate through. So let's close this and what we have. Now we can move on into our, now you notice that, run this again, you notice that these blocks stayed still, so now what we could do is make sure the blocks move downwards, or else, there won't be much action if it just stays still. So in our block class, let's create another function, define update of self, and before we do that, in our initiate function, we want to set self.speed y to 3, and this is going to be the speed at which the blocks move downwards. So self.y is equal to the previous self.y value plus self.speed y. And now we want to call this update function in our while loop. In our game loop function, and in our while loop. So right after player update, we can call block.update. We can save this and run. And you see that those two blocks fell downwards. And you notice that when they fall, they don't come back up, and no new blocks are spawning. So what we want to do to fix that is spawn some new blocks. And instead of just spawning it, what we could do is check if that block is below a certain point. And if the block is below a certain point, then we want to move the block back up. So let's go into our update function in our block class. Let's see, where is it? Right here, okay. So we want to check boundary of our block. If self.y is greater than the window height, then self.y is going to be equal to 0 minus self.height. And then self.width is going to equal to, and then here we're going to use the random module that we imported at the top, random.randint, and a value between 10 and 120. And if we save this, you notice that when the blocks get below this point, they spawn at the top, and you notice that the width of this block is random. And then the right block basically adjusts to that block. Cool, so now that we know that our random is working, and our respawning is working. So let's move on to check. And actually, when you notice that, if I run this, you'll notice that, well, the blocks initially spawn somewhere like right here. So a way for it to just immediately spawn up here, we can just set this block y value to a negative 100. If we save this, well, then the blocks spawn up there, so that's good. And now we want to check for crash, collision, and checking for crashing. So let's create a function above our game loop right here that will basically check for crash. And this will be between the car and the block. So we want to define another function, define crash. Font is equal to Pygame dot font. And why we have a font is because we're going to display some text that says you crashed, right? So the font is going to be none, and the size is 80. The text is going to be equal to font.render, and we're going to just say you crashed, or any other message that you want. So true, black. And text width is going to be equal to text.getWidth. Text height is going to be equal to text.getHeight. Get height. And we want the x to be int window width over 2 minus text width over 2. So we want this to basically be aligned. And y is going to be int window height over 2 minus text height over 2. Good. And we want to blit this onto the screen, so blit text xy. And now now we can basically pygame.display.update. And after we display this, we can use a tool from our time module, time.sleep. And what this will do is that it pauses our game for 2 seconds. So yeah, this time.sleep will pause your game for 2 seconds. And then after this happens, we can call the game loop again. So if I save this and run it, then actually, we have no way of detecting collision yet. So before we actually move on to more code, let's look at this graph first. So go to slideshow. Cool. So the real way to basically check for collision in our case is we have basically two blocks right here. One block, two block, one on the left side, one on the right side, and we have our car in the middle. And so we're going to check for x coordinate first. If the left side of this car is less than the right side of this block, then you know that, well, this car is somewhere over here. So somewhere colliding with this block. Or let's say that the right side of this car is greater than the left side of this block. Well, then the car is either in or colliding with this block. And a good so this code basically just represents what I just said. If player.rect.x, so the left side of our car, is less than block.x, which is the left side here, plus block.width, so this side, or player.rect.right, so the right side, is greater than block.x plus block.width plus block.gap. So if it's greater than this plus this, then you know that, well, this right side of the car is over here somewhere. And that's basically how we check for the x coordinate. And now in order to check for the y coordinate, we could check if player.rect.y, which is the top part of our player. So if this is actually less than block.y plus block.height, which is the bottom of our block, then we want to also check for player.rect.bottom. So if the bottom of our player, if this is greater than block.y, so this part, block.y, yeah, if this is greater than this part, and both these conditions are satisfied, then you know that the player has collided with the block. So, yeah, that's basically it for our idea of how we collide, and let's actually implement this into our code. So, let's go back into our code and check for collision with the block. So let's go into our game loop, and right here, in our while loop, let's just check for car collision with block. So using the ideas in our slideshow, we can check if player.rect.x is less than block.x plus block.width, or player.rect.right is greater than block.x plus block.width plus block.gap. So this will be checking for the x, and now we also want to check for the y. So if player.rect.y is less than block.y plus block.height, and player.rect.bottom is greater than block.y, then we want to call the crash function that we created up here. Yeah. So let's run this. And I'm just going to dodge this one, and I'll crash into here. And I crashed. So it waits 2 seconds, and it reloads. Nice. So let me crash sideways. This works. And now we basically have a working game. And before we end this, let's add a scoreboard, right? Because we want to keep track of how many blocks we basically passed. So let's go into our block class right here. Create another value. So self.passed. And this is going to keep track of how many blocks that we passed. And in our update function, this basically checks for boundary, right? So if the block goes beneath our window, then that means that the block has passed the car. And if the block has passed the car, that means that, well, the player has dodged the block. So then, if this is true, we can add 1 to the self.passed. So self.passed is equal to the previous self.passed plus 1. So we basically want to increase that value. And now let's create another function. Define scoreboard and then passed font is equal to, and we want to show the score on the we want to show the score onto the screen, right? So font is equal to pygame.font.font none 25. Text is going to be equal to font.render, and we're going to just print out passed and plus string passed. So passed is going to be an integer. We want to convert that into a string with the with this method, the string method, and true. The color is going to be black. So we can blit this onto the screen. So blit text 0, 0 at that location. So now in our loop, we can actually just call that function. So let's see. Right here above the pygame.display.update, let's call scoreboard. Scoreboard block.passed. And now if I save this and run it, you notice that I passed 2 blocks, and now it says I passed 2. And if I collide, well, I crashed, and it restarts after 2 seconds. So this is basically just a working good game, and there are plenty of ways to make this more difficult or easy. You can increase the speed of these blocks, and I just want you guys to have fun. So I'll see you guys in the next project, and I'll see you later.